Joining us now is airline engineer and safety advocate, Captain Dong Rampam. It's good to see you in the studio.
Thank you. Good morning.
And I like your African dress. It's really good.
I thought it's a good change.
And your name is so musical.
Well, the full name is actually Dong Rampam.
Okay.
And you mentioned engineer, but I'm also a pilot.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. He's a pilot too. He's an airline pilot, engineer and safety advocate. Now, let's delve into this issue. The aviation industry has had a lot of issues. People outside may not really understand. The only way they understand is when you get to the airport, you want to book a ticket to anywhere, and then there are hitches here and there, or sometimes your flights are cancelled, and other times just things like that. That's just all they see. But let's get into the real issues. Government points to the fact that anytime we talk about economic issues, government points to the fact that the drop in oil, global oil prices and all of that. But how does that affect, or how does that impact, or is that just the problem of the whole aviation industry?
Well, it is a problem to the aviation industry. But you have to realize that Nigeria is not the only country that has aviation. And not only in developed economies, but also in sub-Saharan Africa. We have got South Africa Airways, we have got Kenya, and in, will I say, Northeast Africa, we have got Ethiopia. So the industry exists already. The only thing is this: did we not know we were going to have a recession? We cannot say we were not aware of that. I mean, the current Emir of Kano, when he was central bank governor, 2012, he made elaborate presentations, not just one, elaborate. He warned about this, and he said, if you are subsidizing consumption, you are setting up yourself for a major economic disaster. And this is exactly what has happened. Secondly, it's planning. The airlines are private ventures. There is no more government airline in the country. And so they are profit-oriented. Of course, safety has to be a major factor to that. But when you refuse to plan, you are planning to fail, and that is exactly what is happening. I would have to add again that one other factor, which perhaps some people may think is uncharitable, but there is a regulator. And from 2006, that regulator had autonomy, which means the whims and caprices of the minister will not affect regulation of the industry. So if the regulator spots anything, they have got the presidential mandate to correct it. The problem is this: how far has the regulator been able to implement the economic regulation part of the industry? And that is where I would say we have had a bone to pick with the regulator for about 4 years now.
Okay, what should have been put in place really for what you're talking about to be in effect?
You see, these airlines that are, in quote, temporarily suspending their operations, most of them are doing this because they are unable to send their aircraft for scheduled maintenance, scheduled heavy maintenance, normally called a C check. There is possibly now no need for a D check, which is a heavier check, because what the manufacturers and the operators and leasing companies have agreed with is to periodically fit in parts of that D check into the C check.
Okay.
Historically, the C check should be carried every 18 months. And every airline owner knows that. Every airline owner is expected to submit a comprehensive business plan that does not only show how they will run the operation, but how they will run it profitably. And
before they were given the license?
Before you start.
Okay.
The AOC process, or Air Operator Certification process, is a 5-step process that lasts averagely 6 months to 18 months, depending on how ready you are to start business before you apply. And the first phase of it actually is a sit-down chat with the regulator, where the regulator advises and gives guidance to the potential investor on what to do and how to do it right. And I think that's a very good thing. That's the first step. It's called a pre-application phase, before you even apply. And the next phase is the application phase. And you're guided through these processes until the final fifth phase, which is the certification phase. Then you start operation. Off the cuff, globally, all airlines are advised to make sure they have got plans for route expansion and profitability. Okay. And you must have funds to run your entire operation for 3 months minimum without 1 penny coming in as inflow of capital. So these are safeguards that are in there. There's also the economic regulation, which mandates every single operator commercially to send in data, traffic data, and returns on investment, profit margins. There's a word called break-even load factor, and it basically shows what percentage of your seats will you need to fill with the current fare in order to break even, which means not make a loss. So that's a critical number all operators must come up with before they start, and it's part of the business plan. So that every single month, every 30 days, a report about how you're faring economically goes to the regulator. So right. These are the parts.
And we assume all of these guidelines you've enumerated, we assume that all of them were adhered to at one time or the other, especially the preliminaries before they were certified, because all of these airlines have been operating for more than several years now. So what is really happening? What's the missing link right now between maybe 2-3 years ago and now?
The missing link is accountability, and I would say slightly negligence. I will not say fraud, but I'll say negligence, because every aircraft owner who wants to fly commercially, especially with a schedule, has to keep aside what is called a maintenance reserve with every single ticket you sell, every flight that takes off and land. And that is to go towards ensuring that this C-check is expeditiously carried out. The C-check could last between a week and 3 weeks to a month, depending on what level of work is required. And the 2 airlines that have currently said they're suspending operations have aircrafts on ground unable to go for a C-check, and that is why they're suspending their operations. The law mandates that airlines who have a shuttle will not be allowed to operate, in fact, with 3 airplanes, with less than 3 airplanes, and then sometime the regulator would look at your schedule.
So who do you blame for this right now?
Well, first and foremost, I'll blame the airlines themselves. They submit a business plan, which I assume they did, and the business plan spells out exactly how they're going to run the business. Running the business involves keeping maintenance reserves so that you can do your checks. In fact, many times you are expected to be able to lease another aircraft. For that 1 week or 3 weeks, the aircraft is gone for the C-check, and that is a stopgap measure. The aircraft returns from a C-check, and then you continue operations seamlessly. Nobody notices that that has happened. How many times have you heard foreign airlines stop operating because they are unable to do C-checks? It doesn't happen. But I would have to add this, that the government itself is complicit in this matter. I will not say the regulator. I would give you one. The reason why they are unable to pay for this C-check, despite the maintenance reserves, is that if you look at it, from last year to now, on the street, anything you're buying in dollars has doubled. It was, for instance, officially 197 to 200. Now, how much is it in the so-called newly formed flexible exchange program? 420 as of 2 days ago. So if you were planning on 200, you now need 400. So double whatever it was for maintenance.
So even that reserve in this case,
that reserve will not work.
Okay.
And why I say the government is complicit? In 1977, the Nigerian government decided they were going to have a national hangar, which was going to grow into an MRO. An MRO is a maintenance reserve overhaul facility. We have been operating a flying school since 1963, which was more or less nationalized and run as an entity within the establishment in the country 1971. They said they were going to have a national hangar. 2002, the then minister Kema Chikwe made a statement that a contract has been given to a certain company and they have started work on clearing the site for the national hangar. It is now 14 years. Where is this national hangar? That national hangar will have been able to Well, I say, take the place that Nigeria Airways was building up, which was a huge maintenance facility. Right now, we don't have one single facility, not just in Nigeria, but in the whole of West Africa, which is a shame to the Banjul Accord group, which we belong to regionally. We don't have a place for heavy maintenance on any commercial jet.
So where do all the jets from here go to carry out maintenance?
They go everywhere else, including South Africa, including Morocco, including Ethiopia and Egypt. Can you imagine that is where we, Nigeria...
And is it that capital intensive to get it done, to get a place where...
It is capital intensive. Okay. It cost averagely for a small aircraft $300,000. Now change that to Naira with the current rate. So we don't have an MRO. The government is aware of that. They made a decision. They did not implement that decision. In 2004, the Nigerian Aviation Safety Initiative, we made a presentation, and that was one of the things that we brought to the fore. We need to have an MRO here for two reasons. Reduction in the cost of operating airlines. The second reason is the transfer of skills. We do not have engineers, local engineers, who are experienced in carrying a C check. And that is why I also think talking about a new national carrier, it will be a futile experiment unless we have two things. One, an MRO established in the country. Two, a TRTO, which is a type rating training organization. Right. We don't have this. And the government published, I would say in 2014, that the Nigerian airlines spent 6.3 billion every single year to send pilots for recurrencies. That money would have been invested
in the economy,
in making a full-blown TRTO for that 1 year. That money will have been able to foot this bill. Capital flight, transfer of skills. This is where I think the government itself is negligent.
Okay, we'll come back to understanding other aspects of this issue. Now, let's see the operation of airlines and how they interact with regulatory agencies. Now, the domestic and international airlines operating in Nigeria do not exist in isolation. Certainly, Dongran Palm said that earlier. They are regulated by a number of agencies, which include the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, NAMA, which provides air navigation services, the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, FAN, that manages all commercial airports and provides service to both passenger and airlines, and then the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, which oversees the activities of the entire aviation industry.
Then we have the International Air Transport Association. They collect charges from international operators for the aviation agencies. The domestic airlines are expected to pay a specific amount of money to these agencies for various services rendered, but this is not the case. The regulatory agencies are losing revenue, while these agencies must remit 25% of their earnings to the Federation account, pay staff, and of course pensioners. The airlines must pay for issuance of pilots and licenses, aircraft inspection, en route navigation, terminal navigation, landing, parking, and other charges.
Yeah, many airlines in the country are barely keeping afloat as a result of the value of the Naira, access to foreign exchange and aviation fuel scarcity, as such, are heavily indebted. Now, many airlines now go to other countries to fuel up and even relocate their operational bases to other countries. The revenue that Nigeria gains from the fueling of aircraft and accommodation of cabin crews of foreign airlines has been taken over by Ghana, which now provides these services, making Ghana the aviation hub in West Africa, a position that Nigeria previously held.
Okay, we're going to ask you this question now. Do you agree with this a position now that Ghana is taking over from Nigeria in this area of aviation engineering, as it is?
Well, if you have been reading the World Economic Forum report on Nigeria, one thing we have done by shooting ourselves in the foot is make it very, very difficult to start a business. In fact, they reckon that we have almost deliberately put impediments to starting a business in Nigeria. And these are some of the things that are driving away investors into neighboring countries, where there is more stability and there are less barriers into getting and setting up a business. What is Ghana's population compared to Nigeria? We have a huge market. And for you to know how bad this is, for certain foreign airlines to decide to pull out of Nigeria, operating into Nigeria, it must be really bad. Because despite the despotic regime during Abacha, when Britain decided to ban all Nigerian registered aircraft, and we reciprocated by banning all foreign aircraft, who came back begging first? The British companies. because Lagos-London is one of, if not the most profitable route for the UK carriers that were operating under our bilateral air service agreements. They came back because they were hemorrhaging funds. So we have a huge market, and that market is even growing. But without proper guidance, planning, accountability, self-auditing, we will not know how bad or how good we have done our jobs. And one of the things I hope will happen is that the regulator themselves will self-audit themselves on how far they have succeeded in the economic regulation of the airlines.
All right, we feel, or we certainly assume that all the regulators, all the players are people who have international experience, who have years of experience, who have qualification of all kinds.
Yeah.
Why is it difficult to put that into play when it comes to reviving or stimulating the huge market in Nigeria you talk about?
They had done things in the past to stimulate, only most times they don't carry them through. And one of these things which we commend the government for doing was to remove all duties on importation of aircraft and spare parts. This we recommended as well in 2004. I think it was implemented about 2 or 3 years ago, but it was partially implemented. They took off, they agreed and removed the duty on importation of the aircraft. But on parts that you need continuously, they did not implement that. And I remember the AON made a presentation to the new Minister of Aviation, who looked into the matter and agreed to make sure they have zero duty on both aircraft and parts. But I'll tell you what happened after. One of the airlines actually had 2 engines that were recently imported, and the Customs and Excise held those engines and asked for duty, despite the minister's pronouncement, and they said it's not been gazetted. So you see, when you take a decision, follow it through.
All right.
Cross-check whether it's been effected. So these are some of the things that we have to, address and correct.
All right, now the domestic airlines owe more than 40 billion naira. Among the debtors are some airlines that are no longer operating with the agencies. Recent reports reveal that the nation's biggest airline, Arik Air, is allegedly the highest debtor in the industry with a bill of about 18 billion naira, even though that is disputed because they say that's not how much they're owing.
Okay, so the agencies have now begun a debt recovery drive and may descend heavily on the indebted airlines. Already, ANAMA has started to ground the operations of some debtor airlines. Some of the airlines have started paying up the debt, while some have met the agencies to reconcile their debt and work out repayment plan. The agencies have also intensified the pay-as-you-go method to ensure that new debts are not accumulated by the airlines and that they pay for the services rendered to them as they operate.
Now, the NCAA also ordered that reconciliation of all outstanding debts by the airlines must be completed within 60 days. All right, we'll look to how that, the feasibility of that.
Pay-as-you-go.
Yeah, let's come back to Dung now. You talked about the issue of a national carrier earlier on. Government seem to be interested because we hear comments here and there, even though there hasn't been an outright move towards acquiring a national carrier. But if we have to look at it at this, how feasible or how desirable would that be, or what impact would that create in the industry?
I would borrow a phrase from one renowned French philosopher, René Descartes. We think, therefore we exist.
All right.
If the government and the airlines don't start thinking, we will cease to exist. Our economy should not be in this current state. We have had almost no single airline that has survived with great longevity without huge support from the oil and gas sector. And I say that is why it's not a really airline, but Aero Contractors has endured this long. And if it is not careful, this is the last quarter Aero Contractors will exist. Despite government intervention years ago, with AMCON administrating on the board, that airline is currently hugely indebted, unsustainable debt, which means absolutely unsustainable debt. Taxpayers' money, part of the bilateral air service agreements fund, the BASA funds, was used and to make up the airline intervention funds. How many of those airlines still survive who have received it? Some of them are currently almost extinct. Sky Power Airlines. Are they flying IRS, Chanchangi? These are airlines, some of them have benefited from this, and they're not even operating. What is going to happen to that money? That is taxpayers' money. That money should have gone into schools, hospitals. So accountability and auditing yourself after a venture. You were going to rescue the airlines because a lot of banks were exposed to the unsustainable loans from the airlines. Okay, you rescued the banks with taxpayers' money. The airlines who were rescued, they are not even operating. How much losses should we continue? We need to change our method. So let us think about what we have done, audit ourselves, go back, review it, and ask ourselves, if we had done this consistently, it has not worked, perhaps we should change our approach.
All right, we'll come back to this issue, Captain Dongram Pam. Now, we're going out on TVC Entertainment, but viewers there can continue with the TVC Breakfast on TVC Nigeria, Kansat Channel 190, DSTV Channel 418.
GoTV 45, ACTV, it is still 510, so let's continue the conversation there.
All right, if you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast, and we're discussing the challenges in the aviation industry in Nigeria, and we're looking at way forward. We have an airline pilot, engineer, and safety advocate, Captain Dongram Pam, with us in the studio. We've been discussing this all the while. Now, let's look at the issue of debts you talked about. These airlines make money every day because there's no one that travels on credit, except maybe from the government officials who may say, okay, give us this for a period of time. I wouldn't know. But everyone who travels pays whatever is required to be paid. And from the payment of tickets and all of that, there's monies earmarked for there's a breakdown of what money is segments of the monies and all of that. So why are the airlines not being able to pay back the debts they owe?
That's to the regulators now.
Poor economic regulation. And normally most credit facilities go for between 30 to 90 days credit limit. And most of the times, most of the airlines default on these payments to even service providers like fueling companies. And fuel constitutes approximately 30% of the cost of operating. They default. And why I'm saying this should not continue is that the regulator is expected to have a snapshot of this every 30 days, mandated. Send records of all of this to the regulator. And the regulator possibly would find a way to step in to stopping this from becoming a habit, because it shows that the airline is not healthy if it is defaulting on contractual agreements. And something should be done as a deterrent to stop that. Not just punitive, but also palliative. And I say that because out of the fuel that is being sold, FAN has a fixed percentage that they get from these fuels, or from the airlines, or perhaps from both. These airlines are providing a vital service.
But talking about palliative, was it not the same palliative measure that came in terms of the loans that the government came and bailed them out, and some of them never really bothered to pay back their loans?
That is it.
So another palliative is coming again.
Yes,
What happened?
yes. And because some people think some of us are too critical of everyone and don't want to. But what we do is we take everybody's position and look at the big picture from that position. And so we side with the operators. We made a huge presentation and consistently ask for, in fact, zero taxes. More than 5 years moratorium on taxes, or tax-free, tax holidays for all aviation companies. I don't know if the government will do that, but they should do something like that. Give all startup airlines 5 years tax holiday. Reduce some of these charges so that the airlines can be sustainable. It does not look good for the reputation of Nigeria if we started a national carrier, Virgin Nigeria. And how long did it last? Ended up in bankruptcy, litigation. It is not good. So these are some of the things that we are saying the industry, regulators, and the government should look at doing. We are also advocating in order to enhance current skills. Let us have an MRO and a TRTO in order to ensure that we have people to take over from us who should be retiring and people who are retiring even now. We need to have training in place. And part of that, we say, is if airlines train ab initio pilots and engineers, let that be deducted, tax deductible. So whatever tax they're supposed to pay, if they had spent $15 million to train these pilots and engineers for the year, reduce their tax by that 15 million. That will encourage them to train. Otherwise, what is going to happen to the manpower needs of the industry?
Okay.
So this is some of the things. If I can correct an impression, the providers like FAN, Federal Airports Authority, NAMA, Airspace Management Agency, NIMET, they're actually service providers. They're not regulators.
Okay.
They're actually regulated by the NCAA.
Okay.
Technically, the NCAA should be able to regulate them, and other offices within the Federal Ministry of Aviation, they provide services, and so they should be regulated by the NCAA, just like the airlines.
All right, now let's talk about the Jet A1 fuel. As it is right now, we knew at the time we had issues, the whole country had issues with fueling. Yes. Fuel issues, crude oil issues, and all of that. Now that there's stability in availability of fuel, if we flip the coin to the aviation sector, how available is Jet A1 fuel?
It is available, but everybody is thinking about dollar and Naira sales, and there is a price. That price, by law, to Nigerian businesses has to be in Naira. But 2 months ago, it was not 420 to the dollar. And what happens is these fuelers and other service providers that have to import what they are selling, they start playing games. And this is where fraud comes in, that I didn't want to say outright fraud. They will hoard it and say it's not available. But if you want it, we can give you at a slightly higher price than what we agreed last month. So it is artificial in order to remain profitable. This is what's happening. We made a recommendation some time back that the airline operators of Nigeria, AON, they should come together, put up a united front, set up a service, service purpose vehicle or whatever that they want to call it, and apply for a license to import Jet A1 themselves and sell it to themselves without having to make a profit. They have not been able to do that. We actually advocated also for the operators in Nigeria to think seriously about consolidating themselves rather than have 17 airlines that are falling all over each other and none of them is making profit. Consolidate, cut down cost. Come up with not more than 5 airlines.
It means that there'll be a merger then?
Or even start interlining, code sharing, and outright mergers. There is something called economies of scale and synergy. They will be able to extract synergy and economies of scale that will reduce their operation cost. They will have to lay off some staff or rationalize their, but that's
where you're going to run issues with the unions.
Well, the unions also have a mandate. Do you want all the airlines to close down, or you want to lose 30% of the staff that are currently employed? What do you think will happen to over 1,500 people in Aero if it goes down?
Even as it is right now, do you think the margin, the profit margin, what with the staff, the ratio of the staff to the profit margin, is it really, is it okay for business?
Look, most of the airlines are insolvent and their operations are unsustainable. Even the mighty Arik, the biggest airline in West Africa, it is perennially in debt. And I'm glad you are the guy saying it. I know that is supposed to be some part of commercially sensitive information, but it's in the public domain. They are hemorrhaging funds. If any airline is making profit, I challenge them to declare their reports. But the NCAA should know this. And the duty of the NCAA to the country, to the industry, is to ensure safe, reliable, efficient, profitable and comfortable air travel.
All right. Now, in all of this seeming challenges generally, how does it impact on the rating of the Nigerian aviation when it comes to international rating?
I think you should direct that question to possibly IATA. But off the cuff, I would say we have made progress, but not impressive. We have made a bit of progress. On the safety side, which is a cardinal part of it, we have made quite some bit of progress, and kudos to the regulator, Captain Usman Multani's team. They have done a good job carrying over from Fola's brief stint and also Demoran's hard work in that part. We have made some progress on the safety part, and that is one good thing that we have. But on the part of profitability and sustainability, I'm afraid, ask the customers. There was a survey conducted by Philip Consulting some time back, and well, there's been a little bit of progress, but not impressive. We are still behind when it comes to even other airlines like Kenya,
All right.
South African Airways.
Okay, a couple of issues. I want us to go back to the issue of the merger of the airlines.
Yes.
If they were to merge, how feasible do you think that is? Don't forget the debt profile that
Yes.
is there, both to the regulators, to the service providers,
Yes.
and the bank loans on the other side. Then, of course, the cost of operation. And don't forget the repatriation of Forex. So can you juxtapose that and tell us if that is workable in the economy of today, merging the airlines together?
Everything is possible. Depends on what you intend to do and how you intend to do it. Well, for repatriation of funds, that will not affect Nigerian Airlines because I expect the code shares and other commercial agreements to be within the Nigerian industry. I say biased, positively biased to the Nigerian operators. And of course, at some point, we actually thought they could do some commercial agreements with other foreign carriers. And we hope that can still happen because some of us are not quite pleased that foreign carriers have multiple designations into multiple airports in Nigeria. They now fly out of Enugu, they want to fly out of local, airports inside the country.
Can I rephrase and
Yes.
perhaps put it this way? If you were a suitor looking for a wife, a new wife, for instance,
Yes.
out of all these airliners that you have, the Aeros, all their names, do you think anyone, it's really wooable as it is? That's my question.
It is not for convenience, it is for survival. And I have a feeling that there is no accountability, documentation of exactly how things are going, because that's what you would look at. I would have to look at your secrets, we'll look at mine, and decide whether we are going to get married. And when we have secrets too dirty for us to even imagine, we will pretend that no, we don't want to get together. And that's what's happening, I think, and that's why I come back on that economic regulation. The airlines should be forced to run themselves like proper businesses on global standards. And I have a feeling that the accountings and the data they provide sometimes could be frivolous. Otherwise, they will not be facing the crisis they're facing now. I have to say as well that unfortunately the margins, profit margins for aviation globally is between 3 to 7%. Just to post that with inflation, currently 16.5%. Interbank lending now 14%.
14%.
What is happening? As a final thing I'd like to say, historically, if you ever want to get out of a recession, you have to increase government spending. Make it easier for people to access funds. Make it cheaper for them to access funds. The UK is not really in a huge recession, but they just reduced their base rate from 0.5% interest to now 0.25, 1 quarter. If you look at the last 2 quarter reports on aviation in Nigeria, they actually claim the transport sector made a bit of a profit. There are 4 or even 5 parts of the transport sector. And looking at the last 2 quarters, from January all the way to June, all the other ones showed an increase in revenue that comes in, except aviation. And I say all, including road transport, rail transport and pipelines, water transport, transport services, post and courier services. All of these showed increase, except aviation that showed a decrease, which means it's not very elastic when things happen. Basically what has happened is that less people have traveled by air and they prefer to go by boat, by road and by rail.
Because it's cheaper.
So,
All the alternatives. Now, before we're winding down on this discussion, but let us know, as from where we stand right now, if steps have to be taken to revive the aviation industry, what would those steps be?
we have to have a snapshot of what is really going on. Because that is why I say there is no accountability and transparency on both sides. And I am saying on the economic side, we're not very, very worried about safety. But you see, when you falsify economic data, financial data, you're putting yourself in for a fall. Because what will happen is some of the airlines, and I think possibly now the regulators are a bit more vigilant. Otherwise, airlines used to ask for extension of the C check. 18 months, they asked for extension. And some of them have gotten 2 or 3. But that was in the past. That is now more or less not available. And that's one kudos to the regulator. So now we know that they're due for C check. Otherwise, they would technically fly with aircrafts that are, or engines that are unairworthy. So I'm glad the regulator is putting their foot down on that. And also admonishing the airlines and encouraging them to ground their own operations if they are unable to carry out the checks as when due.
Okay, what about
Now,
the debt recovery, the 60 days ultimatum?
Well,
Do you think that will work?
let's see. Let's hope it will work. I sincerely doubt it, because yes, if you exceed the 60 days, the 60 days for reconciling the accounts, there's also another limit with which if you ground your aircraft, your airline past that, you're not operating, you may have your license suspended. For 60 days, honestly, I'm not a pessimist, but I don't think that is realistic. I don't think it'll happen.
All right, Captain Dung Rangpam, thank you for enlightening us the issues around the aviation industry and reviving that sector of the economy. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.